Welcome to the Wellness Revolution podcast.
Hi, I'm Dr. Veronica. Welcome again to the Wellness Revolution. I have with me today one of my esteemed colleagues, another medical intuitive. My purpose of bringing to you medical intuitives is so that you are able to understand how to widen your medical team, your health team, to get results. And so, as an intuitive, we do things that are considered in left field, but we also understand how to get results. A lot of times, results that can't be gotten with traditional medical care. Now, we're not saying throw away all your doctors. We're saying keep them and add other people to your team. So for me, I started my life as an eye surgeon. I'm a clairvoyant eye surgeon. Well, what do you have? Well, what do you do with that? Well, then you take on homeopathy and functional medicine, and then you finally get the strength to admit that you're having these visions and you help somebody with the visions. So I'm bringing on today Owen James, and he has such a wonderful background. So he has his traditional background, which is in, I believe, psychotherapy. Is that right, Owen?
Psychotherapy, also trained as a naturopath, acupuncture, homeopathy, and shamanism, working in Brazil and Peru.
Yes, and so you see, he started probably doing what he was supposed to do according to his parents and society, and then realized that, hey, there's something missing, and I have to learn some other stuff. And instead of going back to a traditional university, he went out to people who understand how to fix things that we don't learn in school in our universities. So I welcome medical intuitive, homeopath, fellow medical intuitive, acupuncturist, shamanic healer, Owen James. Thank you for being on the Wellness Revolution.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So let's get a little bit about your background first. How did you end up doing what you're doing now, which is just, for most people, so non-traditional?
For me, it started as a musician. I was kind of a child prodigy. And I think my big change came when I was 12. And I went for a walk in this beautiful land called Big Sur, California, sometime around 12 at night. And I went for a walk. I had liberal parents. In fact, they didn't know I went for a walk. That was a nice thing. And I ended up on the bridge, this big bridge over Anderson Creek. And as I'm standing on the bridge, this wind starts to come around me, and I realize I'm being completely surrounded by spirits. And I just knew that that's what was happening. And it was just around me. And I thought, this is great, what a wonderful feeling. So but that progressed, and there's a place in Big Sur called the Big Sur Hot Springs. And the Big Sur Hot Springs is sulfur water that came down, and then that got changed. When I was 17, I was running 3 concert series in the coast of California. And these fellows came and they took over the hot springs and turned it into Esalen. And Esalen became the first humanistic growth center in America. And so they brought in people like Fritz Perls, the Sigliani, all the Tai Chi people. And so anyone who was anyone, Eric Burns' work of transactional analysis. And here I'm running these concerts here. I'm 17, 18 years of age, and they say, come on in and look what we're doing. Just sit and watch what we're doing. So it's like changed my life, because I saw people doing things. I saw people helping, getting help. So I started putting that into my teaching. I'd have kids beating pillows and screaming to get their breath opened up and to express themselves. So that's really, I started in that way. Then I trained with Dr. Rolf in Rolfing, who is brilliant. What she taught how to see into a body. She wasn't interested that a shoulder was high or a hip was low or a foot was turned out. She said, what's inside? What in the fascia is causing that twist? So she forced us to look inside a body. And then I did a lot of training besides in healing with certain people like John Reed who worked with, this was in New York when I moved there, and he could go in and he could take in the body and he would pull things out with his fingers. And I'm standing there and I'm watching him do this. So I went and tried it. And so I started pulling things out with my fingers too. So, and then I had a client once who I was working on his wife, and he was sitting there and he's saying, I can see it. I can see what you're pulling out. Sometimes I could just see the energy coming out, but he could actually see the white straws coming out, or the darkened straws coming out. I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. He's seeing things I don't see. So it's that progression in time. I worked with John Upledger in craniosacral therapy, was teaching for a while. And what he taught was how to listen to the body, how you really go in and listen as a group sometimes, listening to the one mind working. And all of this started bringing me more and more and more into the sensitivity of observations until I created my own system. I trained in auricular medicine, the work of Dr. Norgier. Very complicated. You have like 300 little round filters, and the filters have everything in them. Morphine, homeopathics, vitamins, and you flash this over someone's auric field while you're holding their radial pulse. It's like, it would be fine if I could be one of these Indian gods who had 6 arms. I only had 2. And I needed a third one to write with a pencil all the things that came up. Some people have this great memory. They could remember through a whole session. That's not me. So what I discovered was that I could feel the change in the body when I could put something into the auric field. I could feel the change in the radial pulse without feeling it. So that gave me one free hand. And then I realized this. My work has always been vibrational medicine. That's what I called my work a long time, because everything is vibration, as you already know that. And so that started me setting up an encyclopedia of the body, liver, kidney, because everything vibrates differently. Jean-Pierre Barrel was a person in visceral medicine. And what he showed was that the organs all have their own movement. They all have their own feel. They all have their own sensory touch. And so a liver is not a kidney. The other thing that happened to me when I was 27 is I went to Mexico City. And I had the privilege through a healer I was training with in New York to work with Pachita. Pachita was an old Mexican lady woman who got taken over by the god Cuauhtémoc, and she was not around, but he took over her body. And she would talk in Mexican, oh, buenos dias, señor, da, 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 da. And he would talk, well, I want to tell you, this deep, deep voice would come out speaking ancient Castilian. Okay, the big operation that affected me was with a 10-inch knife, an old kitchen knife. They stuck it into this French girl, and I'm sitting on the table holding her hand because I'm supposed to be an angel anesthesiologist, which I was not. But anyway, I was holding her hand, did the best I could, and he stuck this knife into her right lower gut, and he cuts all the way in, pounds it in, cuts, reaches in and takes out a rotten kidney. And then out of a little clay crock, she takes a kidney that her nephew, who works at the morgue, gathers these body parts from the morgue. Now this sounds, of course, totally insane, but I'm watching this. And he takes this kidney from the morgue, from this other person, puts it inside this 30-year-old beautiful French girl, and wires it up somehow, closes it up with his hand, just going click, click, click with his hand, a tiny pink line, hardly any blood. And I said, what is the body? Okay, you can't do that. No doctor can do that. But that's what happened right in front of me. And I watched 3 other operations of Mexican women where he took the same knife, and they don't clean the knife, by the way. There's still dry blood on it. And they cut open their bellies and open their intestines. They take blockages out, and one of them was a tarantula. he pulled out this tarantula from her intestine, which is black magic, that someone was putting black magic on her. At 27, when I saw this, I said, well, this changes my life, doesn't it? You know, I knew my anatomy. I knew that this can't happen except in some other altered dimension it happens. And that gets back to our medical intuitive, because we're working from another dimension. We're not working from the cold science dimension. We're working from the sensory visual knowing. And so I started just setting up this kind of double way of one, I always wanted to be able to do that kind of healing, like Philippine healers. They go in with their hand, open the body, take out blood clots and all this stuff, right? I still can't do that, but I do my own. You know, I can see sometimes tumors disappear under my hand, so forth, but I still can't open a body. Maybe someday I'll do that, I don't know. But there are other ways to do all of this, as you know, and you do it yourself because you're quite psychic and you have this ability to perceive into a body and change the organ structure, because that's what happens when a tumor disappears.
So the interesting part for me, myself, is you're talking about we're working in an altered dimension. And I trained as a traditional MD. I was an eye surgeon. I've been in all other types of surgery through my medical training. And now I can perceive issues and all that I never, well, here's the thing. I realized even when I was back in medical school that when I was getting answers, it was probably I was intuiting the answers. It wasn't just because I was smart. To get clinical answers in the patients who were the zebras, they're not the horses where it looks, you know, they put those cases out there because they're meant to stump people. And those are the type of cases where it's just like, oh, it's this, it's Behçet's disease, it's acquired, somebody will sit down in front of me or start talking to me, and all of a sudden a diagnosis will come. Now I'm an MD, so I know all these names, but it'll just pop in, it's blah, blah, and then I ask the questions to verify my diagnosis. And it's amazing to me how accurate I am without the benefit of what we will consider modern technology. Lab results. Somebody came to me and said, I have a problem with my eye. And I said, oh, you have this, and here's what your deficient is, and here's what you need to do about it. And then she said to me, you're absolutely right. I had lab testing, and that's what it showed. So for what you have learned, and what you know, because you've walked in a much more vast path than I have, how do you explain this ability to people? How do you explain where it comes from? We're saying, okay, we're working in an altered dimension, but people are like, well, you're crazy. And this, you know, from I'm a doctor. And so from a doctor standpoint, I always have people sign disclaimers to say I'm not making a medical diagnosis, doing medical treatment or psychotherapy, yet I can get better information than they've gotten from their traditionally trained MD. So what do you tell people? When I hear acquired acromegaly in my head, I don't tell them they have acquired acromegaly, because I'm concerned that people who used to be my colleagues are going to say, well, you're practicing medicine, and how could you do that because you don't have the lab test to result in, and blah, blah, blah. Even though I know what to tell them to do, and I know, you know, you need this remedy, this herb, this is what you're deficient in. I'm not getting it based on that hard data, case control, double-blind, retrospective study that's in a peer-reviewed journal. So what do you tell people?
I tell people simply kind of what I said already, that everything is vibration. So that when I talk about the body from the Pachita point of view, or some of the other healers, Abrigo in Chile, who used to use a pocket knife and just scrape, or John of God, who I've been to a number of times, who takes a scalpel and just cuts in the body, or the spirit healers there, where you're sitting in a room and suddenly there's blood coming down someone's shirt and there's no doctor there. It's just sitting there, but the spirit is doing this work. So we're working in this other dimension, and the
They found you.
half an hour. He's calling back from Beirut.
Okay.
because we're setting up a whole program in Glastonbury to do some ley line healing and in July, and some ceremony work. Yeah. So somehow people don't really ask in a certain way when I tell them that everything is vibration and the liver works like a liver and the kidney works like a kidney. And then when I'm teaching, I ask people to close their eyes and picture a shelf of fruit. And I say, does a banana vibrate the same as an orange? Can you feel the sense of a banana? Can you feel the sense of an orange? Do they feel the same? And working with that kind of chi energy with the hands, getting people to feel in their hands, this, what does this feel like, right? And I've never met anyone who couldn't have a sense of the energy between their hands. And already that's helping to expand that, hey, there's something here, right? So taking that into that next step where you're talking about this wonderful medical that you have, maybe you'd like to join our staff when we set it up, because working from the doctor point of view and working from the intuitive point of view and putting these two sciences together, because when we realize that some of this is probably traceable, if we go in and we look at say the past life records or a curse, and we go back through that history, where is it, we could say, where is it coming from? But this has been talked about for thousands of years. Records, that all of this exists, that we can go back in memory, we can do past life.
So we're talking a little bit about past lives here, and I will say that before I even, let me say myself, bought in that past lives were really there, even though I could see stuff happening, I could see myself in particular positions in the past that I knew were not in this life. I knew something was going on. I knew something was different, but I was told by another intuitive, a psychic, that, oh, you're a healer. You've always been a healer. Now I can see lives where I have had healing abilities. This is the first life where I've been a Western MD, but in other lives, I had amazing healing abilities, the type that you're talking about. In some places where people, I was known for that, and people came to me, and this is thousands of years ago. It's been one of my core geniuses, and in fact, I feel like in this life, this has been my least genius life. But I believe I've been in training for a particular reason, and everything hasn't come out yet because I had to learn another modality. And so here I am, where I had to go through this long process of learning another modality. However, I know in these other lives, I've been part of a tradition of healers, and I knew how to move people's energy. I knew how to do it. Other people in my cultures and societies knew I knew how to do it. And this is what I've done for many different lifetimes in different capacities, man, woman, looking different ways, different ages. Even in one life, I set up a big clinic where there were a bunch of other women. We were all in the healing professions, and people used to come from other countries. This was in the Middle East, in fact, in other countries, to visit our clinic because we were known for being able to get results when nobody is. So they would bring us to dying, and these people would walk away. So when you talk about past lives, I've had all kinds. We all have had all kinds. But one of the threads that has gone through a lot of these lives, even when I was doing something else along with it, was that healing thread. So here I am again.
Mm-hmm.
So where have you been otherwise, in other past lives that you can see? I've
been shaman. I have been American, Indian for many lives in the Southwest, many lives. Here I've run sun moon dances for 16 years, Native American from New Mexico. My teacher, Joseph Rayel, beautiful painted arrow. one of the world's greatest living mystics. And so what other lives? Lives in the East, lives in China, as a doctor, as an acupuncturist. So yeah, I've gone through so many different lives, a lot of lives as a Christian. Where that's, I was brought up non-religious, but when I was 27, all these wonderful things happened to me, including being called by Sai Baba to go to India. And so I went to Sai Baba and spent a month with him in the early days when there were very few people there. Not 500,000 people, but like 400, 500 to 17,000 showed up for his birthday. So these kinds of lives that have brought me this gift in the Christian world. So even though I wasn't brought up in that world, I now run a Christian church. And we have a healing center, the St. Francis Circle of Life, which is developing. We're doing some trying to get together to do some crowdfunding to build a new building that we have space to house people. You saw on my webpage the beautiful chamber we have, Peace Sound Chamber, working with people, chanting for world peace. So this is some of my direction. I've seen many times where, as a Templar knight, hooking into this Christ light, that's been a important. When I saw that, I said, okay, I need to really embrace this aspect of my life because it's been coming for 2,000 years, so it's time to embrace it. The difficulty that I find with many people is that we've been so tortured through these Christian lives, not confirming ourselves with the Catholic ideal, which meant we'd get burned at the stake, tortured, killed at the time of Jesus. I was there on the hill, got beaten by the Romans. Wow. So this kind of lineage brings up both a resistance and yet keeps us in this path. And so that's taken me to places in the world where I get to remember, oh yeah, I've been here before. Just like when I went and did a pilgrimage into the Himalayas, and I'm sitting in the cave where Vyasa wrote the Vedas, and it's like, well, welcome, son, we welcome you back. It's nice to have you back with us. I said, yeah, I feel like I'm home. I've come home here. That's 11,000 years ago when I sat in that cave with him. So we look at these lives and we look at our lineages. So many, I've been initiated as a Brahmin, I've been initiated as a Buddhist. But each of these I've had to relive from all my past lives where I've been a Buddhist and I've been a Brahmin and I've been all of this. But this life I've had to come into this line more of this Christian, but not a Christian really, a Christ light, the new Christ. So our church has a double cross, which represents the new Christ, which is what's new. New is going back to the old Christ, which says, I'll love my neighbor, I will not gossip, I will tell the truth, I will be friends, I will not hold things against other people. It's so simple, right, when you come down to it, but hard to live for people. So that's I teach people how to open their heart and clear themselves of all the entities, the things that are in our world that we don't see but are possessing people, in drug addiction and alcohol addiction and sexual addiction always has dark forces attached to it. So I do a lot of work with that, and that's where the curses come in also. Because
you were telling me a story about a woman, very professional, who she had some health problems, but she also had curses. And so let's talk a little bit about that, some of the curses and the cords. This is something a lot of people haven't necessarily heard about. And I'm following this up with your Christian side and your embracing of that, because I have found a lot of people who subscribe to Christian beliefs have a hard time embracing people like me and you. Mm-hmm. So let's transition into you know what, I've done that this day and age Christian walk where it wasn't for me the way a lot of people practice it. But, my name's Veronica for a reason. I was named after a saint and I was on that road. Okay. And that's how I ended up having the big healing clinic. I had a clinic because Christ said to me, and I didn't even know who he was at that time, said to me, heal the people, keep healing the people on that road. All right. So we've come through this Christian tradition, yet now many of us who have these abilities that cannot be explained are considered dark when we're nothing but light.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about curses and cords and all that we tend to ignore a lot of times as Christians, but are real, that we need to, in order for people to figure out how to heal their physical, they have to heal these energetic issues that are going on. So talk about that.
I think when someone looks, if one is a Bible reader, and you look at the time of Jesus and the stories. Now, if we come to the present day, we have even bishops writing books that Jesus never existed, that Jesus is a metaphor. And this is, of course, ridiculous because of not only history, but there I am with Sai Baba in India, and Sai Baba once a year brings up when he was alive, he would bring up in Sivaratri festival a lingam. And the lingam, this one lingam was a beautiful blue lingam, and the top of it was completely clear, and the middle of it had a little candle burning. It was flashing like this, and one side was Sai Baba and the other side was Jesus, a picture of Jesus that he had manifested with some people in the early days. The year before I got there, they were on a beach. And Sai Baba blew in his hands 3 times. And the doctor from LA asked him, why 3 times? Usually, you just manifest something out of your palm. And he said, well, it took me a while to find the original cross of Jesus. And here, I'm giving you a piece of it with the true picture of Jesus on it. And so when we say these people, the writers in the papers here, that Jesus did not really exist, they're talking about in the books where Jesus talked about, I healed this man of demons. The demons came out of him. The same with St. Francis. St. Francis, one of his great disciples, he talks about clearing him of the demons, and yet people get upset at me if I talk about, oh, you have 3 demons in you. Oh, don't talk about that. Right? So we're in this very shallow world that we live in, not recognizing drug addiction, alcohol, all this we talked about has very dark forces inherent in it. Not only that, look at the world, look at the murdering, the killing that's going on in this beautiful existence we live in. ISIS, what happened the other day in London. This is not just human, this is the very dark forces that are at work to stop the kind of light that you are bringing into the world, that I'm bringing into the world, that the church that I work in and have been pastor of for years, bring this light into the world through the ceremonies that we do. So when we look at then this expanded self, and we're also talking about the ET world, we're talking about the influences of implants into people. And I teach people how to clear it. It's really simple. I'll give it to you right now. This is a gift from Archangel Gabriel, a little disc, about 1.5 inches wide, 1/16 of an inch thick. It's been pre-programmed. People put it in their head, and it clears all the implants. And then they can drop it down, because most people now have at least 2 or 3 implants in their heart. And if they're very active sexually, they'll have implants there, because they're like energy transmitters, but they also interfere in our central nervous system. So you will nearly always have some in the hypothalamus, and you'll have them sometimes growing when they've been in there for years. They'll grow down like a lymph node system into the central nervous system. So, and this interferes with people. So like I had a person, because all I do is 1 out of 100. What is the vibration of the pituitary? And if the pituitary goes, the thyroid goes. So in most cases. So, but they never test pituitary. They only test thyroid, and they do that wrong anyway, right? I mean, most of the time they get the wrong testing for it. So someone's hypothyroid and they say, oh no, your thyroid's fine, when it's not fine. because of this, expanded testing, because so many people are sicker today. So being able to clear the implant that's in the pituitary normally in most people is 65. Your pituitary 70 out of 100. So you have this very active queen. Pituitary and hypothalamus are the queen king of the whole energy endocrine system. So your pituitary is very active. But see, if I get someone whose pituitary is 40 or even 35, and then I look at it and I see they have 2 or 3 implants in it, have them clear the implants. I don't clear them, they clear it. And then it suddenly goes up to 60. Well, it's clear that those implants are interfering with the energetic flow of that, including anywhere in the body that these implants can be. So people say, well, what is it? Where does it come from? Well, this is another dimension. If ETs can come here from another galaxy, and maybe they're not human, maybe they're reptilian, but they have the advancement, mechanical advancement, to be able to do this. And finally, I learned how they implant everybody. I mean, it took me years. I meditated on it. How on earth can they implant a whole city? I finally got it. I saw it one day, how they do it. And it's kind of like you have 500 TV channels coming down into a city, and nobody sees that. Nobody sees the rays of that. You don't see the rays coming out of your telephone when you hold it to your ear and burn your brain. People don't see it. But they get a TV, they can turn it on, right? And then they say, oh yeah. And the same thing about telephone. I said, do you ever pick the telephone up and the person you were going to call is on the other end of it? That's all mind. The mind has all of this, being able to pick this up. And everybody's had that experience, so they don't think I'm so weird all the time. Because that's like awareness. You can feel something, you can sense something. So this is very important when we work with these darker forces in terms of cords of attachment, are really thought patterns of a leeching on by somebody, holding on to somebody else. And it's particularly strong when I work with divorce cases, whether it's the husband or the wife not resolving their issue, where they're really not divorced because they have these cords of attachment. And to dissolve those cords of attachment allows the heart to open. Because that cord of attachment has to do with resentment. And resentment has to do with, I have not forgiven you. And when I forgive you, something changes inside of me. And that was a gift that God gave me. God gave me my brother-in-law. I married him actually because I was a reverend in the United States. So God brought him, and he was in this egg of pain and suffering because he had contracted AIDS. In the early days of AIDS, he was bisexual, and he gave it to my sister. My sister eventually died. I could forgive him for that because they didn't know. But he gave it to 4 other women knowingly, and they died. So I couldn't forgive him. But God